Hello and welcome to The Thing About Golf, the podcast series from Golf Australia magazine that attempts to answer that unanswerable question: why do people play this infuriating game? My name's Rod Murray and this is episode 7, but guest number 6 in this ongoing and I hope enjoyable series. If you've only just discovered us, feel free to check out the archive where we've featured some fantastic guests already, including Barnbougle Dunes owner Richard Sattler and 1982 Australian Open winner Bob Shearer alongside his wife Kathy. Last month's guest, two-time Australian Open champion Peter Lonard, proved a real hit with listeners, and if you enjoy great golf stories told with a dash of humour by a player of world-class ability, then I highly recommend having a listen to that one. For those who've been enjoying the series, make sure to share it with any golfers you feel might also like it. We'd love to keep doing these interviews, and if enough of you are along for the ride, it makes that decision that much easier. We'll meet today's guest in just a moment, but first, a little bit of admin. If you've got some comments or questions or suggestions about the show, don't hesitate to get in touch. You can email us at golf@golfaustralia.com.au or find us on Twitter, as so many seem to do in this day and age. I'm at Rod_Murray, that's MORRI, or the show has its own handle where you can send us a message. That's at Thing Golf, capital T for Thing, capital G for Golf. You'll find all the links to those various outlets in the show notes below. Okay, let's get on with the show. And as we gear up for the summer of golf here in Australia, one event is towering over all others in terms of international interest and golfer scrutiny. The second week of December will see the President's Cup played for the 13th time, and the third time at the iconic Royal Melbourne Composite Course. Now, most of the focus will be rightly on the 24 players taking centre stage. But for golfers with an interest in the game's playing fields, the course itself will be the 25th player. With such a bright spotlight shining on Dr. Alister MacKenzie's masterpiece, it's only natural to wonder about those charged with the day-to-day responsibility of maintaining this revered layout. And on this episode, we're going to meet the man who does just that. Unlike many in his field, Richard Forsyth's introduction to golf came on his first day of work as an apprentice greenkeeper. But as you'd expect, his knowledge of and approach to the game, not to mention his understanding of the importance of a cathedral like Royal Melbourne, is now second to none. We grabbed Richard for one of the few spare hours he's had in the lead up to the President's Cup to chat about all things golf and golf courses. It was a refreshing and interesting discussion. Just before I press play, a heartfelt thanks to Richard for taking the time to do the interview in what has been an extraordinarily busy period for him, and also to Royal Melbourne for allowing us a peek behind the curtain. Okay, on with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Richard Forsyth. Let's start with the simple stuff first. Name, rank and serial number for the listeners.
So, Richard Forsyth, the Director of Courses now is the title at Royal Melbourne, and been here about 10 years. And, looking forward to an exciting upcoming couple of months.
We'll get to some other stuff shortly, but just hearing you say that, Director of Courses now, everything about this industry has changed in the last 20 years, including just the language.
Yeah, that's right. I think, from when I started, it was very much about the basics of maintaining courses. But now, of course, we've got, I guess, the science has developed and the grasses and everything that goes with that, but also the number of people and the budgets and it's a real management role these days. And, we've got 40-odd staff and we're managing a $5.5 million budget. So, and probably never really taught that from an education sense. It's been something that you just sort of develop as you go along.
We'll come back to some of all that stuff in a minute. The podcast is called The Thing About Golf. What's the thing about golf for Richard Forsyth?
It's been my career, I suppose. I wasn't attracted to the career through playing the game or being necessarily interested in golf as a young person. No one in really my family was a keen golfer.
What did you think of golf as you were growing up? What sort of image did the game have?
Look, I can't really. I don't really sort of recall being focused or interested in it, but my attraction was I came from a farming background, or my father was a dairy farmer, And the connection was about horticulture and machinery and outdoors, and that was the attraction for me. So it wasn't so much about the game. And then sort of, I guess, really when my first day as in the job at 17 and a half years old was the first time I set foot on a golf course, really. Mm-hmm. So it was quite probably an unusual way of stepping into the role.
It's clearly been a hell of a journey since then, and I'm looking forward to getting some background on it. What about the grass and the machinery and the industry did appeal to you? Because, like everything, all industries are different things to different people who are in them, aren't they? Mm. What was it for you?
I finished high school and I was off to university as I was probably advised I should do, but didn't really I had enough of the school side of things, and I wanted to get out and get into it.
Were you one of those outdoors people where being in a classroom didn't really appeal, being outside kind of? A lot of sport people say that, don't they?
Well, no, I didn't mind school. I mean, I was okay, but I thought after year 12 I'd sort of had enough of it. So I was at home working the summer holidays on the farm as we did, and just sort of started looking around for what are my options. And the first job I applied for was the one I got, so Riversdale Golf Club apprenticeship, and sort of started from there and got into it. But the attraction certainly was outdoors, working with machinery and growing things was a real interest, and it sort of I've loved it ever since.
More from there. Just to back up a bit, where did you grow up? You mentioned that your first job was there at Riversdale. Were you a suburban Melbourne boy, or were you from outside of?
Well, our dairy farm was in Scoresby, of all places, so not too many dairy farms in Scoresby these days. But,
we just looked at the aerials of the golf course, didn't we, and noted how much the world has changed since.
It's closed right in. But so I grew up there as probably one of the few kids from a farm going to the school even in those days. But so we had the benefit of being relatively close to Melbourne, but still the farm life was pretty good. So
you come to Riversdale Golf Club, you start an apprenticeship there. You said you'd not really had any interaction with golf previously. What were your initial thoughts, and what was the sort of structure? And the golf clubs are a very different place, aren't they, to the outside world quite often? What was your first interaction, your first impressions of the game?
I think I felt at home straight away, really, and it was again working with machinery and being outdoors was really appealing, and the surroundings were great. I mean, how could you not enjoy the surroundings? And so, and the people, I think, as well. You soon, there's the real ownership from members about their club, and the atmosphere around there was really quite welcoming, and I just felt very comfortable right from day one. But
is that true of staff too? It feels to me like greenkeeping, agronomy, course superintendents, not true for everybody, but for many it's almost a calling as opposed to a job.
I think to be successful at it, you have to be passionate about it, and you take ownership of the piece of land. If you don't, then you're probably not going to be successful. So you sort of live and breathe it, and you have to do that. And we probably get too attached to and so if there's criticism or things, and then you sort of take it to heart a bit. But you have to be really dedicated to it, and especially at the level of the higher level clubs, because the expectation is really high. So I can't produce firm, bouncy conditions without being committed to that. You can't just sort of walk out on a Friday night and go home and expect it's going to be okay. You've got to live it. You've got to be back here, in the afternoons and checking, and certainly same for your staff. That they're dedicated and committed to it as well. So you need more than just one person to especially here, but with so many
So
holes
much
and so many,
grass.
so much area to keep an eye on. So, you have to be committed to it and passionate about it to really be good at it.
Yeah, like most golfers, Richard, I expected to walk in and see the firm and fast button on the wall. Don't you just press that when you want it firm and fast, then you turn it off when you...
Well, we often have these discussions because, how firm is too firm and it's not a dial setting. And, if you're going with the intention to have firmness in your greens, you can't just sort of, soften it up for the women on Wednesday and firm it up for the club championships on Saturday. So if you've got that goal in mind for firmness, then there'll be times it does get over firm because you just can't dial that in to a setting. So, we have that conversation all the time about that. But it's been something that I've been always try to do is see the ball bounce forward when it lands. And so, for me, that why? Oh, I don't know. I suppose I've been. It's been trained into me, and certainly. One player in particular at Metropolitan Golf Club always drummed it into me that you're going to reward the player that hits the really good shot. You're going to reward him if you've got firmness against someone who can just fire it at the pin and stop it from anywhere. So if you've hit it to the right position on the fairway, or you're coming in from the right angle, you're going to reward the guy who's thought about it and is able to execute that perfectly, versus someone who's coming at it from the wrong angle and hasn't really thought it through. So I took that on board always, and he was a club champion at Metropolitan and sort of really drummed that into me, and I think Royal Melbourne has always had that, or most of the time has had that philosophy anyway. But so coming here, that's what we set out to do right from the word go, is to make sure that the greens, that's how they behaved and how they reacted. And I think as people hit the ball further, as players hit the ball further, not all the members necessarily, but as the good players hit the ball further, to see some of that strategy from MacKenzie's design and Morecambe's construction, to see some of that some of that strategy in the golf course still, you've got to have firmness. Otherwise, you can just fire it from anywhere. But so it's a really important thing for me, and we work hard on that. And you can't just do that by, turning the sprinklers on and fertilising. You've got to keep everything sort of lean and use the right sand and so a lot of things come into that mix.
We'll come back to I've got a million questions just based on what you said there. We'll come back to some of that. What I did mean to ask you was just chronologically, how did you end up here? You started at Riversdale Golf Club at 17 and a half. You now would have one of, I would imagine, the most prestigious and sought-after positions in the world of golf course superintendentry, if I can invent a word, here at Royal Melbourne. What was the journey in between? What were the steps for Richard Forsyth to end up here?
Yeah, loved my time at Riversdale. Did my apprenticeship there, and then did another year at Burnley Horticultural College after that, just part-time while I was working. I saw an assistant superintendent's position advertised at Yarrawonga when the Murray course was about to be built up there.
About 3 hours from Melbourne, for those not from the area, on the border between New South Wales.
And so 45-hole, to make it a 45-hole development, I thought, this would be a great opportunity to take the next step.
So there was a construction element to that as well. They were going to build holes, and so there'd be that part of the process too.
Exactly. Yes. So it was a Thomson Woolridge design at the time. So it was lucky enough to get that role, and did about 3.5 years there during the construction of the Murray course, which was really good fun. We did a lot of that ourselves as the staff, did a lot of the work. So learned a lot of things there, and worked a bit with Mike Woolveridge and had a great couple of days walking through the red gum trees there in the land with a bunch of stakes over my shoulder and a sledgehammer, and Michael walking along going, well, this is the centre of the fairway here, lad. We'll put the peg in there and this will be the green. So there wasn't a lot of using the aerial imagery or GPSing or anything like that. It was very much walk down the hole and drive the stake in. Anyway, it was great fun. So spent 3.5 years there, and then there was a new development at Swan Hill at Murray Downs Golf and Country Club being developed, and the directors of the club came through Yarrawonga, and I showed them around when they were on tour along some of the other clubs, looking at how they might go about developing their new facility. And anyway, made a connection there, and got the job there as my first superintendent's job at Swan Hill, and was involved in the construction sort of right from the very early days there through to opening, and that was very rewarding as well. And from there, the next job I applied for was Metropolitan. It came up as an opportunity there in '94, and lucky enough to get that, and started there and did 15 years there, and then the opportunity arose here, and I really didn't apply for a job in that 15 years at Metropolitan. I was very happy there, lived on the golf course, raised family there. And but this was too good an opportunity not to have a go at, and was lucky enough to get the opportunity here, and been here about 10 years now. So,
indeed. Just to back up the differences between, first things first, what do you learn from being on hand for the construction of a golf course that I imagine you still, some of that knowledge you would use to this day? Because you see it with the covers off, don't you? You understand what goes into it. There must be some things, I imagine, that once the covers are on, knowing what's underneath there is of some help.
Yeah, there's all different styles of construction, and in that instance, we built not exactly a USGA type profile, but certainly had a gravel layer, drainage, and then a set specific layer of sand on top of that, and that was a sort of a construction method that was designed to follow, and it's been used worldwide for many years. Of course, here it's just pushed up out of the local sand in the vicinity of the green, so it's quite a different scenario. But and we're doing a construction of the Sandringham public course, a reconstruction there at the moment, and we're using the same philosophy of using the sand from the site to build the greens with no real drainage layers or anything like that. And that's a bit of a key and it's a bit of a characteristic of the sandbelt courses, although some of them, including Metropolitan, had rebuilt greens, 15 or 20 years ago, and went to that sort of drainage profile, which really changed the characteristics of how the greens react and behave. So, there's a little bit to know about how they are constructed and how you go about that, and what method you might choose to use when you are constructing a new green. So it does affect the characteristics going forward from there. So,
because we golfers don't understand, do we, necessarily, or probably don't think about, a golf course is a living, breathing thing. There are no on and off switches. And there's no immediate, you can water now and that doesn't have an immediate result necessarily right now, and that result will change over time. And is being a course superintendent more of an art than a science? Has that balance changed over time?
No, it's definitely still there. The art and science, I mean, you need to know the science to perform the art, I suppose, or it helps you perform the art. But I still find the way we do things here is very much still touch and feel, and have a we've got all these aids now that sort of we can use, and you can almost sit at your desk and see your moisture change, with all and have all this data at hand. But for me, it's about getting out and touching and feeling it. So there's definitely the art element, and if you're chasing a firm surface, it's really, it's almost like there's some elements of cricket wicket preparation, where you're trying to get that right moisture content to get the right bounce and that sort of thing. So to control that, as I said before, you've got to be out there, and especially in hot weather, because if you're running a very dry system and you've got 35 plus day, it doesn't take many hours of dry conditions to turn the turf over, and then you don't recover it straight away. So,
because grass is hardy, isn't it? But you can't stress it endlessly and expect it to survive.
And especially the grasses that we use on greens, and and then the story of the grass here is quite a story in itself. How it was sort of redeveloped from the original grasses, so it doesn't have any of this breeding for drought tolerance, disease tolerance, and all those sort of things. So it's a little bit more. You've got to understand it a little bit more than you do perhaps some of the newer modern creeping bent grasses that have had a lot of development and breeding put into them to make them more resilient at that very low cutting height that we're down at the sort of 2 mil. We're cutting the life out of it all the time and rolling it and then drying it out. So you abuse it a lot. So it's hardy to a point, but you get it wrong and it'll soon tell you, put up a white flag and say, I've had enough, and all of a sudden you've got sick green. So yes, it's you've got to work with all those parameters. But it's and then the fairway grasses, the warm season grasses that we use here, couch grasses, are a lot more resilient in the hot weather. But
and they're less stressed by being golfed. They're not cut as short and as often, and there's not the rolling. And
no,
they don't do the hard work.
And so the greens, of all sports, all people prepare surfaces in sport or natural turf surfaces. Golf is one of those things where you're judged by that little white ball rolling across the surface, and so there's no room for imperfection or blemishes because of the way that the game's played and what you're judged on. So it's different to kicking a football around on a ground or horse racing or whatever. You're judged on that roll.
I'd not thought of it that way, but the interaction between the equipment and the field is unique in golf, isn't it? In no other sport, as you say, in cricket, the ball bounces over the outfield, or in these days generally flies over the outfield till it clears the fence. It doesn't exist anywhere else, does it? Where the surface itself, the living, breathing surface of golf, has such an impact on how it's played.
Well, lawn bowls a little bit, but you've got a little bit more tolerance because of the size of the ball and the way it rolls. But
it's got no bounce either.
No, that's right. So. That's the premium is on that ball's in contact with the surface all the way across, and in a tournament situation, you get those low camera angles and the high definition. You can see exactly what's going on, so that puts a lot of expectation on your surface preparation as well.
Just to whip off on a tangent, given that, why haven't we gone to artificial green surfaces, which surely would be much easier to prepare exactly as you would want at any given time? They can just make it in a factory to whatever you specify. Why haven't we gone to that? I know that as a golfer I wouldn't like it and probably wouldn't put up with it. Most wouldn't. What is that connection, do you think?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, and I guess as time goes on and there's more focus on sustainability and water and the environment and things, it may gather some, and they'll develop these things more to get them to behave and react. But I don't think anyone's really come up with the surface that will behave and react like a natural turf surface.
Or look like, perhaps more important.
No, and I suppose it's, you see it in tennis. There's not too many lawn tennis surfaces used at sort of professional level anymore. I mean, there's obviously the main one we know, but so and then cricket, you see the local cricket played on a synthetic surface, but the test cricket, because the surface is a big part of the game, how it reacts and it breaks up over in a cricket situation over time, and the impact that has on a test match and so on. So golf, it really just hasn't. I just don't think they've really developed that that reaction to the ball the way it does on a natural turf surface yet for it to really gain any momentum. I mean, they're out there and they do exist, but they haven't been really taken up at a high level. But
Indeed. Let's go back to Metro for a minute. It's known internationally as one of the best conditioned and presented golf courses on a day-to-day basis in the world. What's it like to be in charge of that and be responsible for that? I imagine it's fantastic when you hear everybody rave about it, and nerve-wracking the rest of the time when the pressure's on to keep it that way.
Yeah, it's sort of it's gained that reputation.
Is that your fault? Was that under your watch that it gained the reputation?
No, I think it prior to me, but it was certainly one of the first clubs in Melbourne to adopt the pure couch fairway surface. So probably going back to the early 80s when the fairways used to be just a mix of all sorts of grasses. And then Metropolitan was one of the first, and they engaged Peter McMaw from Sydney, who is probably our best-known turf expert in Australia. And he was a very real innovator at the time, but he was able to develop this system of spraying out all the competition grasses and develop a pure couch surface. And then from there, he also selected a grass known as wintergreen couch, and he recommended to Metropolitan to improve their natural couch grass by overplanting with this wintergreen, which is very fine leaf and very high surface quality. So, I think they were early adopters of that, and others followed, Kingston Heath and Huntingdale and followed closely behind. But I think Metropolitan was a leader at that time in terms of having pure couch surfaces and then improved couch grass as well. So from there, it sort of gained a reputation, I think, and no one had ever seen fairways that's so immaculate. And I'm not sure necessarily whether that's where we need to go with fairways, but anyhow, it's set this standard for fairway surfaces, and so we just continued on with that in my time there. Greens, we played around a lot with greens and rebuilt all the greens there, and so again using sort of some of the newer improved creeping bents. So it was I think Metropolitan was an earlier adopter of changing grasses and modernising their turf systems, and from there that sort of probably led to it being known for its high level maintenance, but it certainly puts pressure on. And I think I was very proud of what the staff and we were able to achieve for the 2001 extension match play that was held there, and that was it just had a real element. We had the roughs dried off, were nice and brown, and the fairways stood out, and it was a very it all came together nicely. It was a January tournament, and it presented really well, and sort of from there it sort of continued to sort of hold that reputation. So
you found the "Look Magnificent" button for that tournament. Press the button, "Look Magnificent," and there it was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it doesn't happen all that often. So,
if only
take it while you can get it. Yeah, exactly.
If only it were so easy. Of course, you've ended up here, Richard, as in charge of two of the most revered layouts in the world. And of course, the composite course here at Royal Melbourne always appears in the lists of the top 5 or 10 best golf courses in the world. Does that play a part in day-to-day work? Are you aware constantly that you're a part of something, not just in Melbourne, not just among the members? But I feel like all golfers in Australia feel a little, and I think this is true of Augusta too, we all feel a little bit of an ownership of Royal Melbourne because it's such an important part of the Australian golf's history.
Yeah, I think even before I worked here, did quite a few trips overseas looking at golf courses and things, and I think we'd always, groups of superintendents we went with, we'd always use, or I certainly would always use Royal Melbourne as a bit of a measuring stick, so you go along to Shinnecock Hills or, St Andrews or, how does it stack up against Royal Melbourne? Because that's what we knew really as our best golf course. So I always used that as the measuring stick, and you went around the world looking at the great golf courses, and I always felt, even before I worked here, that Royal Melbourne stood up pretty well against most of those courses that were held in high regard. So, but am I aware of that? Yes, I suppose, but you don't think about it too often.
We can't afford to, Richard.
No, that's right. So, I like to take time in the evening to sort of just go for a walk around the golf course and have a bit of a chance to smell the roses a little bit. So, you do stand at different angles and different views of the golf course, and you think, gee, this is a special place. But when you're out there doing the work, sometimes you could get caught up with it's just another green and another bunker and another fairway. So, but you do admire some of the views, and when the sun's down low in the evenings and things, it's a fantastic time to look at the golf course. So, yes, certainly aware of the responsibility and the regard the course is held in, and certainly you bring people here that know a little bit about golf architecture and design and have never seen the place before, and they just sort of they're in awe of the place, and sort of does remind you how good it is. But if you keep going around in your job and just looking at that thin patch of turf or that scarring there, you get caught up in the negatives. You don't take time to appreciate it. But no, I'm certainly very aware of where it's held and the regard it's held in. And when you do travel internationally, people talk about Royal Melbourne and want to know about it. And so you do appreciate that it is held in high regard. Yeah.
Is it a spiritual place, Richard? I reckon there's probably 2 or 3 places in the world where I could happily watch 15 markers play golf, and this is one of them. There's something about this place, I think, if you love golf, if you really love golf and what it can be, this is a bit special. You can go to other terrific golf courses, great golf courses, architecturally phenomenal golf courses. Maybe that's just something we attach to it, I don't know, but this place has always felt special to me.
No, definitely. There's a feeling, when you drive into the driveway, come through the front gates. There's definitely a feeling about Royal Melbourne, and it's the history and the tradition and what's happened here. And we were talking about people that remember shots and things that happened and those sort of things. So there's so many examples of things that have happened in tournaments over the years, and I'm not the best person to recall them. But
we'll get Clates to fill that.
Yeah, that's right.
He'll very every one of them. Yeah,
he's very good at it. And so I think that's what gives it that sort of sense of being somewhere special, and and the years and the MacKenzie and the connection, and so there's all those things, and then of course it's the land and how it looks and the scale of the place and all those things that go with it. So yes, it's definitely got that about it.
Scale's something I feel like maybe it's what Royal Melbourne does best. There's a scale to the place, isn't there, that you don't feel those beautiful, big, sweeping dog legs. Augusta looks somewhat similar on television to that feel, but scale is don't know if underrated the right word, maybe overlooked with what makes places special to play golf at.
Yeah, I think that's if someone said to me, what makes Royal Melbourne, the course that it is, there's a few things to that, but definitely the scale. And and when it hit home to me is we were doing some photography at a tournament time, and had the opportunity to go up in a helicopter and sort of get up above the course and look down on it. And there's two things that everything's to scale, but the scale is big. Yes, that's right. So you've got these, big greens, big bunker areas, wide fairways, but everything's to scale within that, so it just really fits together well. And then you get up over a golf course nearby and look down on it. It looks like a scaled down version of Royal Melbourne. So I think the scale thing is really important to how the place plays and feels. And of course, it's the land and the contouring and the sand, the vegetation, and all those things come into it as well. But yeah, the size and the scale and how that all works together is very important, I think.
A grandeur. Helicopter bird's eye view of your own golf course is something I suspect not many course supers have the benefit of ever seeing. What was that like as an experience? It must have been different.
No, it's great. I've done it a few times, and just I think with tournaments and things, you sort of get that opportunity. In the old days when they used to do the fly down imagery of each hole with the camera strapped on the front of the helicopter, I think things of technology's moved on a little bit.
That's right.
But,
tiny little helicopters these days.
So often the Channel 7 people were good enough to say, to the superintendent at the time, would you like to go up and have a look and things? So that was a good thing to do, and it does give you a different perspective for sure. So. Yeah.
So about your relationship with golf. We'll come back to the course and the upcoming President's Cup. We haven't even got to that yet. But your own relationship with golf, you'd had virtually nothing to do with the game when you started. Did you take up golf when you were at Riversdale? Did you take an interest? What's your relationship with golf now, and how's that developed over the years? And do you need to be a golfer to be in charge of a place like Royal Melbourne and do it properly?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, and anyone who knows me, who has played golf with me, this will bring a smile to their face. But I remember Paul Rack, the general manager here at Royal Melbourne,
legendary general manager, I think.
That's right. When I was employed, and we were talking about, someone was asking me about golf, and he just sat back in his chair and said, "Well, Richard, we didn't employ you for your golfing ability." And it's probably just as well that we didn't, or Royal Melbourne didn't employ me for my golfing ability. And I think it's a bit of source of some embarrassment to me, the standard of my golf. But
welcome to the club, Richard.
So, and I don't work at it too much because, I'm committed to doing what I'm doing. And, if you have a day off or time off, it's probably not the first thing you're going to pick up and do. But I do enjoy a game, and I've probably been fortunate to play a lot of the great golf courses of the world, very poorly, but had the privilege to do that, and probably not be able to appreciate them as well as someone who can play well. But look, I love that. I love to do it, but it just embarrassingly I can't do it very well. And being an 18 marker is about as good as I've been. But I don't work at it, to be fair, and but still like to get out and enjoy it in the right circumstances. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to be a great exponent of it at this stage of my life. But
nothing wrong with being in the majority, Richard. If you had to be good at it, there'd be about 1,000 people in the world who'd play, and that'd be it. And that wouldn't be particularly good for the game. But what about your relationship with the game? Would you like to be better? Has it frustrated you over the years? Have you always enjoyed it? How did you come to start playing? Some people, as you know, are obsessed with golf, obsessed with getting better and scoring, and some people like me are obsessed with the course. And in fact, I walked a course yesterday because, to be honest with you, I find that more enjoyable a lot of the time than actually playing golf because, like you, I'm not particularly good at it. What's your relationship like in that way? And do you understand those people who get obsessed by golf? You must meet hundreds of them here every day. I would think. They come from all over the world to enjoy this.
Yes, it's the beauty of the game, isn't it? I mean, it does really can draw you in and get you so obsessed with it. But no, I don't think it's ever obsessed me to be better at it. It's frustrated me that I couldn't be better, as I said, I don't think I've really committed myself to try and get to a high level of playing. I've just been happy to be able to play and appreciate it and understand from a golfer's perspective what we're doing and how that connects. But, I certainly value and enjoy watching really good players play on the golf course that we prepare for them. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So something like a professional tournament, when you've got the best players playing on the course that you prepare, that's a source of enjoyment for me to watch a highly skilled player play on the course that we prepare. So I certainly get a lot more enjoyment out of that than me trying to
thinning another five irons down the third fairway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Understood. Well, let's come to that. Of course, there's been many tournaments here. How many professional events have you been the Course Super for here? I know we've had a couple of Women's Opens.
That's right.
A couple of President's Cups. How many have you been here for?
So when I started here in 2009, we did a resurfacing pretty much of both courses. So replanted fairways, resurfaced greens, tees, new irrigation system. So we did that, and then with the upcoming 2011 President's Cup in mind, so we did that work, and then that led into the 2011 President's Cup. Then we did the 2012 Women's Australian Open, and then the 2013 World Cup of Golf and Australian Masters back to back over a fortnight period. So that was an interesting.
What's that like as a course, Super? 2 tournaments back to back. Now that must change the way you go about things, because tournaments are notoriously stressful on the golf course.
That's right. So you've really got to try and time your run, and you can't sort of have necessarily the driest and firmest conditions over 2-week periods. Quite tricky, and you get a lot more weather variables with 2-week preparation. So it was a different dynamic, and probably I think we got through it okay. But it's probably not the ideal scenario.
14 sleepless nights as opposed to 5 that you normally get.
Yeah, well, look, the sleepless nights often are leading up to, because I always say it's if the painter paints the wrong colour in the room, he can stay up all night and repaint it the right colour. But if you get the turf wrong and it dies, then you can't fix that for 3 months. So it's a 3-month.
It brings it home, doesn't it?
It does.
The reality of
Exactly.
And for an event like a President's Cup, the World Cup that you mentioned, some of the events that you have here, it's international scrutiny, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
On television screens that are showing things in much more detail, shot with cameras that pick up a lot more. It's not getting easier, is it?
No, and the expectation from the players, and they play on fantastic conditions
year round,
week out. So. There's a high level of expectation there, and again, the responsibility of sort of trying to manage that and deal with the infrastructure build and things that happen leading up to, as well as focus on what you're trying to do with your turf as well. So,
of course, you've got a bunch of traffic out here on the course for the next couple of months, bringing in truckloads of steel and all sorts of things to do. How does that impact the preparations? Obviously, you've got to keep them away from the playing areas. I imagine there's some logistics involved in that.
No, it's definitely a big factor for something like a President's Cup, where there's so much infrastructure to come in. So I think we've got something like 8,000 grandstand seats for this event, and corporate hospitality is, I think, about 30% bigger than it was last time, and it was quite a big build last time. So we've got some new, some additional facilities, and some of the facilities are much larger than they were last time. So a lot more scaffolding and marquees and things to come in, grandstands. And then, I think we had about 25,000 spectators per day. In 2011, it's going to be more like 35,000 in this 2019 event. So, that getting people around, and that's where the scale of the place comes to the fore, because you've got room between the vegetation and the fairway edges to allow that sort of number of people around and things. So. But we sort of dedicate 1 or 2 staff pretty much right from now through, looking after that, working with the organisers to minimise the impact on the golf course, to get all that build and infrastructure done. So.
Because, of course, as the manager of this section of the course, something like a President's Cup is multifaceted. There's managers from every department, I imagine, regularly in meetings of Royal Melbourne with the PGA Tour and others. All of that cuts into your time to oversee and ensure that the golf course, when the TV cameras get turned on, is in the condition that you want it. So there's a real juggling act, I imagine, there to be managed when you're in your position particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of facets to it as well. So, you sort of you get involved in how do we get water to the hospitality areas, and
electricity,
and then they've got to peg down all these structures and things. So you've got to
OH&S, you can't have people tripping over, and
no, all that. But you've got to get power and generators, and you've got to put stakes in the ground, so you've got to mark out all your irrigation and underground services because we don't want them driving pegs through that. All the signage that goes around the tees has got to be pegged in. So there's a lot of things, and then how do they get in and out, and then the emergency services and gates and security, and so there's a lot of even the catering, and how do they get to where they need to be, and how do they get water and services to where they need to go. So all those things are over and above. But you've got to put it in perspective and say, well, the playing surface is really where the focus for me is, but you've got all these peripheral things happening around you. So car parking and, so there's a lot of things to a tournament of this size that sort of do distract you from what we normally should be focused on.
Just listening to you talk about that, you must have chuckled in 2017, I'm going to say, when there were calls to move the US Women's Open from the Trump course in Bedminster and just play it somewhere else. 3 months before the first tee shot was supposed to be hit, people couldn't understand that. That's really not feasible, is it?
No, and once it's been planned, then it's very hard to sort of make a change and then as soon as you start building,
there are literally years of work goes into preparing, of course, for an event like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, indeed. Back to surfaces and playing surfaces and the expectations of players these days, and all of those things, and metro. And are we heading in a healthy direction? It feels to me like there's two strings being pulled in golf. We want to see perfect golf on television, but we want to have sustainable golf for the rest of us to enjoy. How do we balance those two things? Because, of course, Augusta National gets the blame for it, but I feel like most professional tournament courses probably share some of the blame. The conditions are always perfect, and so when the golfer goes to consume a retail golf course, they have an expectation that what they see on TV is going to be matched by what they play.
And I think golf course superintendents are to blame in some respect as well, because we're continually better educated. We have better tools at our disposal, and we're able to produce these pristine,
quite incredible surfaces. Playing surface. If anyone's not been to Metro to play, it's quite. The first time I went there, I was nervous about walking on the grass. So perfect is it as a surface? It's almost carpet-like, which is wonderful. But is it sustainable? I guess. Can we have both?
So it's a thing that is often talked about with our industry, and certainly at our club, we talk about that. And you think about 30 years ago at Royal Melbourne, and there was no fairway irrigation, so the fairways just went brown and they'd crackle under your feet when you walked down in the middle of summer. Greens were not maintained to the level they are now, but also there was less play and the expectations were different. So while superintendents have and the industry has responded to make higher level playing surfaces, the bar keeps going up from the clubs and then players. It's hard to sort of turn that back and go back to what it might have been, 30 years ago. So it's a real challenge, I think, to deal with. But
does it use more resources to do that, to maintain a course in the condition like, let's say, Augusta National, that we see it for that tournament week, the resources required to do that? Common sense tells you it must. Is that true, though? I mean, you must see in your own magazines and publications, industry publications, all sorts of products and ideas and concepts to be able to get that result with less resources. Are we moving to an area where that's going to be sustainable, or is there always going to be an issue with over-presentation of courses?
Yeah, well, you compare the what happens in the US with expectations, and you hear this all the time that the American club members go and do the links courses in Scotland and Ireland and come back and go, oh, it's fantastic, brown, it's hard and fast and running, but then they go back to their own club and they won't accept it at all.
So. Rand Morissette describes it as the lobotomy on the plane. They go to Scotland and have a ball, and on the way back on the plane they have a lobotomy, and when they get back they start insisting on more water, more green, more golf carts, more this and more that. It's funny, isn't it?
But also I think if you analyse that, in the US they're trying to grow turf in places where, you've got high humidity and you've got, very different, the climate of those links courses is almost ideal, where it's, it doesn't get overly hot, it's not overly humid, and the turf just is happy there. You don't have to put all the plant protection products on it, and sort of simply it's just mowing the grass almost. Whereas the US models, they're very, difficult climates, and you've snow and you've got heat,
desert,
humid.
Jesus, you see them in Phoenix, they're an actual desert. So
that generates a lot of the high input things. Of course, the standard and expectation that tournament courses produce also increases that. And if resources aren't a restriction, then you just keep doing what, to get that last 10%. You're putting in
30%, 40% more.
40% more inputs, that's right. So that's the difficult part. But, I think we're all conscious of that. But then, the expectation from your members and players is high. So until that expectation changes, we always have the conversation here. We've got pretty much common couch-grass fairways compared to Metropolitan we've been talking about, that has a much higher density couch-grass, and it's probably a stronger surface. Here we can back off our fertiliser and water and inputs on fairways, but we'll lose surface quality because it'll break open, and I can produce brown fairways quite easily, but we lose the surface quality. So, people aren't prepared to accept that at this stage. But by necessity, water is our biggest challenge, I think.
These are huge questions for the game, aren't they? Not for individuals at individual clubs, but for the game as a whole. These are enormous questions because the outside pressures on golf are growing. It is a big space user and a big resource user.
Absolutely.
And if those things don't change from within, they will be forced from without.
Yes. No, you can see that happening now, and using potable or drinking water to irrigate turf is probably those days are numbered.
Or even as a golfer, you can't possibly support that, can you? As a human, you can't say it's a good idea to take drinking water and pour it on a golf course so that it putts better or you have a better lie in the fairway. Well, there's just no common sense to it.
But it's not, and if it's a scarce resource, then it's even more challenging. So, but what do we do? I mean, our groundwater reserves here are not as good as some other courses, and so what are the alternatives? We harvest storm water and we do all those things here, but that's only good to a point. If it's not raining, you don't collect storm water. So I think there's potential. We dump all this recycled water out into the ocean every day. We've got to tap into that resource more. There's got to be a second pipe system somewhere that's brings that source of water back for irrigation of sporting grounds and golf courses and racetracks and all those big natural sort of turf areas. I think we've got the government, or we've got to invest in the infrastructure to do that, because there's a resource sitting there. It's just that it just doesn't have the infrastructure to bring it to the areas it needs to. So I think that's got to happen more in the future to be sustainable.
On condition and expectations, I wonder, and you'd be perfectly placed to say this, it's the wrong word, but are our worst conditioned courses in this modern age as almost as well perhaps presented as good courses used to be 30 years ago? Does that make sense, the question I'm asking?
It's an interesting one. I suppose, if you're restricted by what you can do, you're going to see more. You've got less personnel and less equipment and less inputs. You're going to see more like what we were used to, 30 years ago. just by the fact that you can't put those inputs into it. But even those courses where they're limited in staff and personnel, there's still the technologies have developed enough to still probably have better surfaces than perhaps they were 30 years ago. Not across the board, but generally, you might have better quality mowers and better quality grasses and knowledge. So potentially even those courses could be a higher level in some respects, particularly greens.
Indeed. We're sitting in your office here, Richard, and there's a lot of paperwork and President's Cup logoed things, and we've talked about the meetings and all that other stuff. Do you still get the time to spend with your boots on the grass, being able to touch the grass that you'd like to? Because, of course, the irony of your job is the more senior you get at it, and you've got probably one of the dream jobs in the world here, as we've already discussed, probably the less time you get to spend doing what it is that you really want to do.
Yeah, that's right. But it does make your day longer, but we just try to be when you need to be out in the field as much as you can, and just try and get that balance right. And so when people come into my office and see the paperwork piled up, that's because still trying to get out as much as I can in the field. So I value that, and I think it's important, and that's what the job is a lot about: observation and sort of, and as we've said before, just being able to see what's going on a daily basis. So you just need to be out there. So
that's experience, isn't it?
That's right. And with a lot of staff and soon to be a lot of contractors around, you just need to be out and about and being in touch with that. And then at the end of the day, you can come back in and do that administrative.
You can do paperwork at night, Richard.
You can, of course you can. If you don't fall asleep.
If you don't fall asleep and you don't have a family or anything else in your life that you'd like to do, you can do all of those things. What's your favourite part about being the course super at Royal Melbourne? What's your favourite part of Royal Melbourne, this property? Is there a place that you sometimes, not to give away any secrets, I don't want the staff to be able to discover you, but do you have a secret spot that you like? You mentioned seeing the place in the evening light sometimes. And are there particular spots that you're drawn to around the course sometimes to sit and have a think about where you've come from, where you are, what the course means?
Oh, I think you admire a lot of those places where probably the golfers admire as well. You stand on the top of we walk down 17 West, and you come up over the rise, and then you look into the green complex, and it sort of just opens in front of you. And I enjoy that vista coming up over the hill on 4 West, and then the green complex opens out, sweeping down the hill. You stand on any of the par threes really and admire those. So there's plenty of places at Royal Melbourne where you can go and say that's pretty special place. And so for me, when you start out in the job, you get your satisfaction from mowing that green and looking back at it and going, gee, I've done a good job there. That looks great. But now it's more about the overall. So the satisfaction comes from seeing your staff produce those results out there. So, you look at the overall big picture, and that's where you really get your satisfaction from. And seeing, I think, from a people point of view, seeing staff develop, and we, over the years, there's so many apprentices have come in just as I did, and then sort of gone out and sort of running their own courses and things. You get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing young people develop that same passion and enthusiasm for the job, and then being successful at it and getting to run their own course and things. So you get your job satisfaction from different angles to what it was when you first started out, and gee, I did a good job cutting that green, or that feels good if I raked that bunker well. So it's a bigger picture sort of feeling, I suppose.
It's a brotherhood, isn't it? The turf industry, I feel like. Golf probably tied amongst itself, but the turf industry in general is quite a brotherhood, isn't it?
A lot of people don't understand. It's a bit weird, I suppose. People that get their enjoyment from watching grass grow.
It's a certain pace to it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
You can keep up.
It's not. There's a bit of witchcraft about it too, I think. So you talk to someone else in the business, and they understand what you're talking about, but outside that, not everyone gets it. The sense of commitment and dedication that not just me, but all the staff have to put in
any golf
to get the results.
You've got bigger resources and everything at your fingertips here, but you're trying to achieve the same things as the single course superintendent facility out in the country. You're doing whatever you can with what you've got to make it happen. I was just thinking while you were talking there, the temptation in your job, I guess, with so much machinery around and everything moving quite quickly, is to constantly be in a cart or some sort of a vehicle to get from one place to the next. Do you get much opportunity just to walk on the course? And is there some value in that?
There's definitely value in it, but you're usually trying to cover the ground to get from A to B quickly, so it just tends to be in a vehicle most of the time. But as I said before, I try to walk around for 45 minutes an hour at night. That's the time to sort of really slow down and sort of just
feel it under your feet.
Close look at things and sort of think about what's got to happen for the next day. So, yes, during the day probably certainly walk on as many greens as I can during the day, but we're relying on our senior people to do that as well. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for walking the golf course and feeling closer to it for sure.
Just the paths you take, don't they? Change the perspective. And not something I hadn't thought about much, but Derek Duncan mentioned in one of his podcasts, Feed the Ball, that when you walk a golf course and play golf, you always enter the green from the front. When you ride a cart, you almost never enter a green from the front. There's a perspective that you completely miss for 18 straight holes, generally speaking, of just walking up the green from the front. It's a tiny detail, but there's something in that, isn't there? Last couple of questions. President's Cup coming up, of course. We know about all the pressures and all the work and everything that's going to go into it. For those perhaps coming to spectate at the President's Cup, can you give us any insights into good places to spectate from or things to look out for on the course? What will you be particularly interested to see if you get any time at all to get out of this office and onto the course when some of the world's best are out there?
Yes, I've been asked this a little bit, but I think, I've got to think about the hole numbering now. We've got so many
the composite course.
So, but 5 and 6 West, which will play as 3 and 4 for the President's Cup, there's always drama on those. And because the greens have a high percentage slope about them, and so the ball can actually, if you don't get it right, it can roll back to your feet and that sort of thing. So there's always drama there. So that sort of amphitheatre sort of effect around those greens, and you can sit up on that bank and sort of watch it all happen. I think that's pretty good viewing. And I think also the shorter par fours where, players will take a different approach where they'll have a go at the green or they'll lay up, and so you see a lot of variety and different in match play scenario. It can be quite interesting to see how they tackle that as well. So I would say the short par fours and those two, what will play as 3 and 4.
That corner there is.
I think they're the key go-to spots. Yeah. But
was it Stuart Manley that went 110?
That's right,
on 5 and 6, and that encapsulates perfectly what can happen in that corner, isn't it?
He thought he'd won the car,
yeah,
and then they tapped him on the shoulder and said he hadn't, and then he
just have it. Never has a hole in one been such a drag on a player's round. It couldn't have gone more wrong after for him. What you've outlined there is really the essence of interesting golf, isn't it? Where there are, you think of 10 West, I'm not sure what number it'll be in the composite. What was the first last time? 3 West, I think. Shortish, sort of. I remember watching Adam Scott have a go at that.
3 West, yeah.
That decision making, when you see good players who have to not just execute but think, add in the match play, and the game is by far at its most intriguing, isn't it? I think.
I agree. Yeah. So and that's what you want to see is how the different strategies and where they are in the match, at what stage the match is at.
That's right.
Do they need to
driver one day might be 4-iron the next because it's just the sensible thing to do.
Yeah, and I think as you said before, Royal Melbourne is a great place to see that sort of interaction between the course and the strategy and the match play scenario. So yeah, look, it's shaping to be a great event. I think it's if you really appreciate golf, it's a great tournament to come and have a look at.
Well, you must have the inside oil, Richard. Is Tiger going to play or is Tiger not going to play? You better tell us, I think.
If
you knew that.
So it seems to be there's two questions that are being asked by everyone, and the other one is the president coming? So,
of course, yeah. Well, that's right. Two big personalities there,
and we don't know the answer to either.
Do you get to meet all of them? Have you met Ernie? Have you spoken to Tiger previously, or the players? Do you get much of a chance to meet them? Do they come and give you much feedback and offer feedback, either positive or negative, having left one at their feet or having hold one that they particularly enjoyed?
Well, last year, part of the promotion of the event is that the two captains come to make a visit 12 months before the event. So I had the privilege to travel around with both Ernie and Tiger for 2 or 3 hours in a golf cart.
Wow!
Last December.
You can't buy that, and if you can, Richard, you can't afford it.
No, exactly.
Trust me.
Exactly. So that was a great experience, and Ernie, as the home team captain, has. When he agreed to be captain, he asked that he have some input into how the course plays and how. So he was very interested in how would we set the golf course up, and he wanted to know the ins and outs of that. So he was quite engaged with that. And Tiger was. He did say he arrived here at the maintenance facility.
Oh, really?
With his entourage.
How big is the entourage? Just on it, by the way, it's not small, is it?
30-ish people. So, but what he said...
Did you know he was coming, or did you just look out the window and there were 30 people there?
No, I didn't know there was going to be 30 people, but I only imagined we had, managers, security, media. Yeah. But he said to me in the golf cart as we drove away from here, he said, this is... I asked him about the entourage, and he said, just goes with the territory, but I'd much rather just come and drive around with you and talk about the golf course. And so you sort of... You understand a bit of his life. He just can't go out anywhere on his own and sort of. And
not many humans live in the fishbowl. A lot of people talk about it. He is one who he can't go out and buy milk. No. Imagine being Tiger Woods and you can't go out and buy. You can do anything else, but you can't go out and buy milk. You can't go to the movies. You can't. It's just not. That's an incredible thing to consider.
And he was an absolute professional when he was here that day, and he was tired. He spent the whole day doing promotional things for the event, but as soon as there was a microphone or a camera in front of him, he lit up and he just was engaged. And between shots, he was stretching, and he was.
He's a genuine golf lover, isn't he? And I know he's pointed more than once to Royal Melbourne and the Sandbelt as a huge influence in his own course designs, which he's done a couple which look very interesting. You get the sense that he's not paying lip service there, that he enjoys being... I plan to ask him when he gets here in the press conference, this course and its role in the game more broadly and the effects and impacts of what's happening around the game on places like this, because it's important, isn't it? And I get the sense that he genuinely feels about that stuff.
Well, he has a design company these days as well, and so he's sent people from his design company here.
Oh, really?
Specifically to study the how it's laid out. So because he does refer to not just Royal Melbourne, but the
Sandbelt. That's right.
Courses to having some influence over what his philosophies and things. From a company point of view and design. So, I think he does understand it and appreciate it, and he likes the firmness factor, and perhaps for what we were saying before is that the pure shot and the person who understands the angles is rewarded. So
he gets to stand out when those are the conditions.
That's right. So I think that's one of the things he really likes about what happens here in Melbourne with the firmness. Yeah,
he's winning... we're off on a tangent here, but his win at Kingston Heath in 2009 felt to me like, you saw some of the shots he hit, even when he hit it out of position, some of the recovery play, like the prodigy virtuoso finding the world's best violin. When the two got put together, it was magical to see, and these are the sorts of courses I feel. He, Savvy, Greg Norman, the players of that genuine extra gear special ability. When you get to see them play a course like this in its correct dimensions, that's when something special happens. It's magical, isn't it? And they feel it too, I suspect.
Well, even from the women's Australian Open, I took a lot out of, the women really didn't adjust to the firmness that just happens here naturally. We weren't trying to make concrete greens to see them embarrassed or anything, but it's just the way it was. The conditions, the weather and everything firmed them up. But Lydia Coe, who I think was maybe a 17-year-old at the time. So she was young anyway.
Or 18 then, that'd be better.
And someone asked her about the conditions and playing Royal Melbourne, and she said, "No, I get it. You got to let the ball release and run up, and you take a club less, and that's how the course plays." And so, whereas some of the more experienced players were saying, "Oh, this doesn't reward good shots," and so on. So, a 17-year-old girl got to she just understood what she had to do, and her comments after when someone was probing her to say, "Oh, it's too difficult."
Yeah, that's right.
She actually came out with that, and I thought it was fantastic to hear her say that. And so
I followed her that final round of Sunday with Mike Clayton, which was a personal joy for me, but what a clinic in a player in complete control of her game and understanding exactly what was required. It was remarkable to watch. While those around her, the frustration was obvious from the other side of fairways for a lot of the players who just don't get to play that style of golf. They're all capable of learning it, but they find it confronting when they've never played it and they suddenly encounter it and the ball doesn't do what they expect it to do immediately.
Well, and we have these conversations with the course setup people because they'll say, "Oh, it's too hard. The green's got too hard. We need to water it. Players don't handle it." And I think, well, how don't they handle it? How can't they adjust to just hitting the front of the green or running it up? Or
there's plenty of room to run it up here, isn't there?
They can do that flight to the pin every day of the week. But if they come to a golf course, when that's part of that's the way it is. We're not doing anything out of the ordinary. It's just the way it is. Our sand type, our climate.
The members here will often tell you they've got it too easy, won't they, when the tournaments are on?
That's right.
The course plays more difficult week to week.
We have that fight all the time. Prepare the course for the players. I'm saying let's prepare the course the way it always is and let the players adjust. The smartest one's going to figure it out. So I just think we trying to standardise or make it uniform across the board. I think the beauty of coming here is seeing something a bit different and see the players that adjust to it well and the ones that don't necessarily.
The role of the golf course in the game feels to me like it's changing. It's probably less respect for it in the modern era, and I don't just mean professionally. But I don't think golfers generally give as much thought to the golf course and its role in your enjoyment and playing of the game as perhaps they should. We certainly know professional golf try to prepare the same golf course each week, just in a different state. We see that every week on the professional tours, and that's part of the reason the players are so good. You dial in a 6-iron, goes this far, you get that yardage, you hit it next to the flag. But the game will be diminished, will it not, if the role of the course isn't protected and understood? Because the arm wrestle is between the player and the course, is not the player and the rest of the players. That's the true beauty of golf, it feels to me.
And you see it in tournament golf because the PGA Tour will put out a book to the host club. This is we want the rough to be this high, this far from the fairway, and we want sand depth to be this in the bunkers, and the greens to run at 11.5 feet. Or I think that's a bit monotonous. It's much better to see different, and that's why we all, when we tune in to see the Open played on the links courses, and there's some firmness and fire and bounce, and there's a whole people go, this is a whole different game, and there's some interest in it. It's just completely different, and so that firmness and bounce and ground game is really important. We just don't see it very often. You watch the PGA Tour all the time, and it's not necessarily it's a strategy. It's just the way where they're playing.
Sure, some conditions only allow you to prepare a course. That's right.
You can't make firm greens in a humid sort of inland sort of treed scenario. So, but it's just great. The mood of golf watchers almost goes up when you see that sort of bouncy sort of scenario, because it's a whole different element.
Brings in the train wreck and the brilliance, doesn't it? And that's what you want to see in golf. Cruelly, we want to see the train wreck because we identify, and then we want to see the brilliance, which stuns us and makes us go, wow.
We say here a lot of time, a hole like 7 West, the short par 3 there, that the members understand how to play that better than we have. Last few years we've hosted the Australian Master of the Amateurs event, which a lot of the good international
pros in waiting. Let's not call them amateurs. Let's be serious.
But they stand on the tee and they go, oh, it's 132 yards to the pin, and that's where they're aiming to hit it. But if you land it next to the pin, it won't be next to the pin when they get up there. It'll be in the back bunker or through the back. Whereas the members play that sort of low left to right sort of running shot and use the contours, and it's the hole is almost easier for them than the guy who's trying to fly it and land it on the green and expecting it to stop next to the pin. So
there's some diabolical places to miss around here. I always feel like when professional golf comes here, we see more big numbers, probably less bogeys, but more doubles and triples because there are spots where you can't make bogey from there. Double is a good result. And that's not true of most courses and most of those players. They are so good. But Royal Melbourne retains areas. You hit it over the back of 6 West.
Or the back bunker.
You'd take 6 every day when you move to the next tee, no matter how good you are.
Yeah, and that's a great part of the course.
Yeah, wonderful. Richard, it's been fantastic to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck with the President's Cup. We'll be down here, and I'm sure the world will be watching, and I'm sure that what they're going to see is a fantastic golf course with fantastic players. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Rod. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, I think you'll agree with me that Richard's made his way into the top 10 of the nicest people in the game after that chat. And I've got to say, he also earns a spot in the top 10 coolest heads under the most pressure. Can you imagine the logistics of an event like the President's Cup and the pressure to present a course in perfect condition for the world to see? Richard's to be congratulated and admired for his contribution to what will no doubt be a terrific event. I hope you enjoyed that talk with Richard, and if you did, then stick around for next month's episode when we'll catch up with one of Australia's most successful and revered players, 23 times a winner on the PGA Tour of Australasia, including sweeping the Big 3 tournaments after his 50th birthday. The legend that is Peter Senior.